Santos. I will be your host of the house today. Today we have really good things lined up, ready for y'all. For those that are new, Yo House is a global group of diverse friends that have meaningful conversations, diverse sounds. The YO means young and old. We don't emphasize on age, but we emphasize on the young, which represents wonder, risk taking. Old represents, sages in the industry with wisdom and experience. Feel free to have some dialogue within the chat box. Tell us where you're from. We reply back. And today we're gonna have a special theme on epiphany. There's a lot of geniuses in the room that you may learn from, and you never know who's in the room. So today we have Jimmy Bae. He's going to be doing a presentation format and telling us a story. The presentation format is something that we debuted earlier in the year called the Pecha Kucha. In the spirit of 2020, we're going to have 20 slides in 20 seconds, kind of like a quick style of presentation of his story. Jimmy Bae is one of our community members, one of our Yo House geniuses, a future sage in the house. Just learned that he's not from Brooklyn. He's originally from Glendale, California, holding it down from the 818. So yeah, Jimmy Bae, tell us about your epiphany, your story, what led up to it, what can we learn from it? And thank you for sharing your story with us. Jimmy Bae, take it away.
Come on.
Thank you, Christian. You unintentionally or unconsciously always in that spoken word flow. I just love how you just rhyme "take it away" and my last name. So it's all good. I just wanted to share with you guys my story today, and I hope that everything that I share today can really trigger maybe some of the memories that you guys might have. And a lot of the epiphanies that I had really came from what I think were moments of healing, and a lot of the repressed memories from my own childhood, I think, just coming back up to memory. So as I go through my story, a guiding quote I want to start you guys off with is this idea that I've heard from my friend recently. They said, you need to revisit your childhood in your 20s and 30s, or else your childhood will visit you in your 40s and 50s. And this idea that if we don't go back and process a lot of the wounds, a lot of the hurts, and learn from them when we can, then it'll really show up in our parenting styles. It will really show up in the way that we act with our spouses and our coworkers later on in life. And so I highly encourage everybody who's in their 20s and 30s to revisit their childhood. And for the older generation, the O of our house today, it's not too late. It's always good to revisit your childhood. So with that being said, I'm just going to share my screen with you guys so that I could talk to you about my story a little bit more. Here is a picture of me in, oh, it's loading. Google, come on, help me out now. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. There we go. This is a picture of me in Bolivia, buffeting, and I'm going to show you and explain to you how I got here. Pretty much this is a snapshot of a normal year for me. I'm always in some part of Latin America eating some bomb food. And if you know anything about me, I'm a foodie. So I hope to explain how I got here. All right, this is me and my family. It started off, this is a picture of me, my mom at my sister's wedding. The Bae clan right here. I'm originally from LA, California, and my family is Korean. My mom raised my sister and I by herself. Shout out to all the single immigrant mothers who are just holding it down. My dad was never around much due to green card issues when my parents immigrated, and I'll kind of talk about that a lot because my family has a lot to do with my story, and it really feeds into my calling, my identity, what I do, and who I am today. So going forward, this is a picture of my whole family, and this is a story that I don't really share too often because my mom told me not to share it, and it's going to change the way that people perceive us, but I feel like it's really important to include this part. This lovely young lady right here is my grandma, and this lovely young man right here is my grandpa. And my grandma was actually a Miss Korea, like I think runner-up. I think she was like second place in Miss Korea back then. And this guy right here, my grandpa, was actually one of the initial investors in Samsung. And, you know, come from a legacy of, you know, bosses and leaders and stuff like that. But I wanted to really share about how wealth and how success has really destroyed my family, because my great grandpa, which would be my grandpa's father, was like a fashion scientist, as my mom often described him. And he actually came up with one of the first proprietary synthetic wool blends in Korea in the 1950s, which was adopted by the Korean government. And every soldier had to wear that coat made of that wool. All of the citizens wore coats of that wool. And so they were extremely rich. If you were to calculate their wealth to today, with inflation, it would probably be in the hundreds of millions, if not billions. I remember when my mom told me this story, I was in shock. I was like, we could have been billionaires. But the reason why that wealth never translated is because my grandpa's sister got jealous. See, in the Korean hierarchy, the eldest son gets everything. It would have been passed down to my grandpa, which would have been passed down to my dad, who was the oldest son in his generation. And then it would have been passed down to me, who's the oldest son. And I didn't get that because my grandpa's sister got jealous and reported my great grandpa to the Korean IRS that they were using offshore accounts and all of these things to pass the inheritance. And all of it got taken away. And it just caused so much infighting, so much drama. And I feel really bad for my mom, because my mom, she grew up with amazing wealth when she married into the family. But all of a sudden, we lost all of that wealth. She moved to Korea. She moved to America with me and my sister, and struggled from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. working, cooking, cleaning, all of that stuff. My dad was grown up spoiled and never really knew how to commit. And that's going to kind of come up in the story coming up ahead. Next slide. Just want to talk to you. I just fast forward into my teenage years. I said every teenager has an emo phase. That is me with long hair. Oh my God, it looks terrible. And a skate sweater. It actually is spelled SK8. So cringy. But Asian families never talk about what's going on internally. They just bury it down, pretend nothing's wrong, and just move on. In 7th grade, after my dad had passed, I entered a phase that questioned my purpose a lot. And so my dad actually passed away when I was in 7th grade. And it was actually very hard for me because I had a love and hate relationship with my dad. He would often leave because he was so non-committal. Anytime life got hard, family situation got difficult, he would just bounce, and he would just roam around the world, and we had no idea where he was. And for me, that was tough because I would always cling onto his leg when he was leaving through the door, and he would just be like, I can't be here. And so he would leave. And for me, that was really tough. And when he passed away, I wasn't really sure how to process all of it, simply because I just didn't know how to grieve a person that I didn't know how to love, but also felt compelled to love because he was my father. And I was in just this place where I was spiritually, emotionally, mentally unsure. And my friend said, hey, do you want to go on a trip with me to the city called San Telmo, Mexico? We're just going to help out the people there. And I was in a time where I was just so confused. And my dad passed away. And my mom actually had to move to Korea in order to handle my father's finances, because he actually never paid any of his taxes. And we had a ton of issues. And so my mom had to leave, my dad had to leave, and I was living by myself. And my friend was like, you want to go on a trip with me? And I was like, sure, I got nothing better to do. And so we visited this trip in San Telmo. And for a long time, I felt a void in my heart, but that all changed when I had a spiritual moment on this humanitarian AIDS trip that we had down in San Telmo. And I just had this real spiritual experience. And I know that people in this call are coming from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of belief systems and things like that. But for me, it was specifically, I had a moment with God. And this is actually a picture of my baptism. And the reason why my life changed on that trip is because a lot of the pain that I had from my own father, a lot of the pain that I had growing up without a typical family structure, God met me on this trip, and he really just showed me a deeper kind of love. And I had a real spiritual experience that I hadn't really had anywhere else. You know, I grew up in the church. I knew all of the, you know, things that they taught in, you know, children's Bible school and things like that, but none of it has ever resonated. But on this trip, when I was really pondering all the things about my dad passing, my mom being gone, not really feeling loved, not really feeling like I have a family or anything like that, this trip changed my life and kind of goes into who I am today and what I do today. And it triggered two things for my life. It compelled me to work with the youth and the next generation. So that's actually the beginning of how I started off in youth ministry. And still today, I'm working with the youth at New Song. I serve as the pastor of the student ministries. This picture right here is actually, I'm right here standing in the middle among all of these other youth pastors across the country. Andrew Min, who's in the call, was actually there as well. And we usually, gather together all of our youth groups across the country, about 500-600 kids, take them across the border into Mexico and do for them what was done for us, and just passing along that spiritual experience that we got to receive, that love and that healing. And it's quite a logistical craziness to get 500-600 kids across the border into Mexico. You know, it's kind of funny to see the reaction of the border guards. They've never seen so many people trying to get into Mexico across from the US side. And it's always a blessing to see so many people going on to love them. And of course, when I graduated and I left California, Glendale 818 represent, best city in the world. I truly believe it's better than London, Tokyo, Seoul, Paris, New York. It's all about Glendale. But I went to New York and I went into history, education, and ministry. And I really felt called to work with the youth, both in the religious field and also in the education field. And I want to kind of backtrack to my first year at NYU, because this was actually a time of a big healing for myself personally between my mom and I. And I know there's this picture of my mom, my sister, and a piece of egg. It's kind of like my main testimony, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. But that egg has a lot of meaning from my mom, because growing up, my dad was never around. And I could kind of understand that I wouldn't have any love from him. But my mom was around, and I expected love from my mom. And so even though I had wounds from my father, the deepest wounds came from my mom, because I expected more from her because she was present. And what ended up happening was, when I was young, I really wanted her to love on me and play with me, but that never happened. And I just want to explain for everybody who's a parent of a young child. Gary Chapman, he came out with something called the 5 love languages. I'm sure everybody here understands that, but pretty much it just means we give and we receive love in different ways. And so while some person might feel loved when somebody does an act of service for them, another person would feel nothing and would prefer actually a quality time or receiving of a gift. For me, I realized that 5-year-olds, the only love language they have is play. All I wanted to do when I was a kid was play with my mom. And every time I would ask my mom, can we play? She would always say, if I play with you, I can't go to work. If I don't go to work, I won't get paid. If I don't get paid, I can't pay rent. And if I can't pay rent, then we're going to be homeless. And she would always take it to that dramatic end of homelessness. And, you know, I think she was just trying to like so traumatize me and my sister with that, which, you know, looking back, isn't probably the best motivator and creates a stigma. But she was always using that. Even with school, she was like, you need to get good grades to get a good job to make money so that you won't become homeless. And I was like, what do you have against the homeless? Like, what's going on here? But anyway, I never felt love from my mom because she would never play with me. And then growing up, you know, I would watch a lot of Brady Bunch, which I realized not a lot of my peers did in hindsight. But yeah, I grew up watching a lot of Brady Bunch. And I would always see, you know, the kids coming home, and the mom was always there. And she would always greet the kids with, oh my God, Marsha, I love you, blah, 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 blah. And I grew up never, ever hearing that once from my mom. I always describe my mom to my friends as a Spartan woman. She never once said, I love you to me growing up. And for me, it was hard to reconcile the images that I saw on TV and movies growing up of a happy family, of expressing it through words, of saying, I love you. I never experienced that in my life with my family, with my parents. And so for a long time, actually until college, my first year at NYU, I actually didn't think my mom loved me. I thought I was just a responsibility to her and that she was just fulfilling her parental duties in taking care of me. And so this is a city in Korea called Gangnam. And the reason why I bring this up is because I remember while I was at NYU, I was having kind of a spiritual, like personal awakening for me. And a lot of repressed memories were coming up. And I know the theme is on epiphanies. And so I really wanted to hone in on this chapter because when I was first year at NYU, I had no friends. All right. And I'm saying this not to boast about my like spirituality, but more to boast about how much of a loser I was in my first year at NYU. I had no friends and I had nobody to talk to, that I ended up, you know, praying most of the day, maybe like 3-4 hours a day, and just reading scriptures. I was reading about 33 chapters a day, 11 in the morning, 11 in the afternoon, 11 at night. And again, I'm not trying to boast about my spirituality. This is just to show how much of a loser I was at that time. But what was going on was a lot of introspection was taking place in my life at that time. And I remember I listened to this one song by a Korean American artist, and I'll say it in Korean, but I'll translate it afterwards. The lyrics simply said, "엄마, you never said 사랑해, but you always asked me 배고파." And that means, Mom, you never said I love you, but you always asked me if I was hungry. And I was just bawling because all of a sudden that song had taught me my mom's love language. You know, going backwards, I should put in here, an immigrant mother's love language is food, right? It's not forgiveness, right? At the end of a fight, at the end of a conflict, there's just some way for them to not say anything, but just to always have food on the table. And that's how it was for our family. And so I had a big moment of healing and a newfound love for my mom. And I realized that all those years of sacrifice that she had done for me wasn't out of, you know, just parental responsibility, but out of love for me. And my heart had softened up, and I came back home on break from NYU, and I just sat my mom down and I had breakfast with her. And I said, "엄마, can you tell me Mom, can you share your favorite memory from childhood with me? What was your happiest moment?" I had no idea what I was doing. I just wanted to get to know my mom better. I was just trying to make conversation. And she said that they used to be so poor that they would go into the fields, catch crickets, fry them up, and eat chips. And I was like, oh my God, that's next level broke, right? You guys lived in like countryside shacks and things like that. And she said one time they visited this area of Korea called Gangnam, which is on the screen right now. And that's like the Beverly Hills of Korea. And she says a businessman one time gave her a hard-boiled egg. And I don't know if you guys know this about 1950s Korea, but bananas and eggs were extremely rare commodities. Only the richest of people got to eat these. It was a luxury, all right? She bit into that egg and she said it was one of the most happy moments of her life. And as she was telling this story to me, I was just starting to tear up, and I was like, okay, I gotta go. I don't want to cry in front of my mom, but I was just beginning to tear up because there was like a home screen movie played in my mind's eye, and I could just see every morning of my childhood, I would be late to school and I would try to run out the door, but my mom would always stop me and she would say, "Eat an egg before you go." Growing up, I hated eggs because it was something that was forced upon me and I never wanted to eat it. But looking back, it was just my mom's love language. She was trying to recreate the happiest moment of her life for me every day. And I remember I was just getting so emotional, and I just had this newfound love with my mom. And what I realized was through these spiritual experiences and encounters, a lot of the wounds from my father, from my mom, they were healed. And as I was receiving these healings, it made me a better person, but it also gave me direction into my calling and what I wanted to do for my life, which kind of goes into, oh, I guess before I go into my calling, this is a picture of me and my sister try to take a Korean drama picture with my mom. My mom's getting older and she's always getting injured. She like, you know, as I'm getting older and every time I visit my mom, I think my heart breaks more and more because I'm realizing, wow, she's getting old. Like, she's not that invincible mom that I once knew when I was a child. And I'm really beginning to see her fragility. And what's crazy is that her personality is still that of a Spartan. And to anybody in the room who's trying to recuperate their relationship with their own mothers or fathers, don't expect it to go well at first. They will fight you. Even though you might have had an epiphany, they didn't have an epiphany. You might have changed inwardly, but the reality is nothing has changed on their side. And so I would go to my mom and I would try to watch TV with her and she'd be like, you don't like Korean dramas? Go away. And I'll be like, actually, I love Korean dramas. And she and I would just keep watching. And I could tell that eventually she started to like it, but she would fight me on everything. I would try to hold her hand as we walk into the mall. And she would be like, oh, gross. Why are you holding my hand? And then I would just keep grabbing it. And now she doesn't even fight it. She just smiles. And I think if I can encourage anybody in the room today, whenever there's any kind of parental reconciliation with your mom or your dad, they're going to fight you. And you just got to love the hell out of them. You got to love the fight out of them. You got to love the negativity out of them. And it will change. Love does win at the end of the day because anger is strong, but love is long lasting. It wins the long game. And so just wanted to leave that. Okay, I'm just going to get off my soapbox, stop preaching right there. But that led me to my calling of education. And this right here is a 19-year-old me about 9 years ago. And I led a trip to San Telmo to Mexico with a bunch of teachers. And we just taught English. And I wanted to share this community with you guys because this community is a community that's filled with, that's just been abandoned by the government. They're not taxed, but they're also not provided for. And so they have to work for themselves. And they usually work on the farms for about $7 a day, about 12 hours of working on the campos, the farms. And they don't make much. And a lot of the kids, the first summer we were there, we asked the kids, what do you guys want to be when you grow up? And I kid you not to make any stereotypes or to reinforce any kinds of stigmas upon one group of people. But I kid you not, these students, when we asked them, every single one of them said either a farmer or a drug dealer, because that's all they knew. That was all that they saw in their own community. And after spending one summer with them, right, we would play games with them. We would dance with them. We would sing with them. We would hang out with them. We would feed them. We would teach them English. We would talk about anything that they wanted to know. They kept asking me to teach them karate. I didn't know karate, so we just made up stuff. We would plant trees together because there's no agriculture in that area. It's just wasteland. We would pray together, all of these great things together. And after just one summer of doing all of this stuff with them, this is a picture of me. I was in charge of taking care of this baby, and the baby and I both fell asleep. And this is when I realized how hard parenting is. So I don't judge any parents who are having a hard time in this quarantine. More power to you. But I realized at the end of the summer, we asked some of the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the answers changed. Every single one of them started to say, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a teacher. One answer really broke my heart. One of my favorite kids, his name was Ivan. And I said, Ivan, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, I want to be a good father. I want to be a better father than my father was to me. And in that moment, I just had that second epiphany into what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to work with the youth so that they can have these kinds of revelations that I've had. And I also want them to have a hope, because a lot of us in America take hope for granted, but these kids, they never had the chance for a hope. Hope is a privilege. All they ever got to saw was farming and drug dealers in their community, and that's all they could hope for. But when we educate, when we teach, they were really able to hope again and believe again. And this is one of my favorite classes. These are a group of 5-year-olds, and we would teach them English. And this was about 9 years ago. And when I visited back again, we revisit every year. A lot of them now are teaching English to their younger brothers and sisters, are teaching, are actually preaching, are actually leading song time and all of that stuff. So it's amazing to see these 5-year-olds just 10 years later as teenagers teaching the community now. And so I really believe in the power of education. Oh, sorry. This is just a short video, but we're running out of time. So I want to finish my story. This is TFA, Teach for America. It's an educational organization in the US that trains teachers to work in schools and communities with the highest needs. And so for the past couple of years, I've just been working with TFA. This is my cohort, my team. We got the opportunity to teach for a year in the Bronx together. And it was some of the hardest things. We would stay up until like 2, 3 a.m. together, grading papers, creating new lesson plans that the kids would be able to enjoy and relate to. And then to wake up at 5 a.m., do it all over again. One of the craziest times of my life. This is some of my favorite students. I eventually transferred from the Bronx to Brooklyn, and I started to teach some of the kids in Brooklyn, and they came from a little bit of a rougher neighborhood. And so it was very difficult for them to believe in schoolwork and the power of education. And so we would take them to colleges in order to make them believe that their present actions and education has future consequences and can amount to greater things. Also, this is a picture of us doing collaborative games in New York. And in New York, there's a collaborative push. They want all of the kids to work together and to study together. They even forced us not to have individual desks, but everybody has to be in a group desk. Problem is, a lot of these kids grew up in a rough environment. And so the second they disagreed, they would actually be fighting. They would actually start swinging at each other. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. What's happening? So we actually had to start playing games at the beginning of each class. We actually had to start doing cooperative exercises and things like that together. And not to throw my principal under the bus, but she would always lower my teacher rating as ineffective. She's like, you can't start classes with a game. And I was like, if I don't do this, they're going to kill each other. And I don't mean to boast, but we did raise the average test score from 40% to 85%. Okay. We had a 45% test gain. And then she came up to me at the end of the year and she was like, all right, respect. I'm going to leave you alone for this next upcoming year. And I was like, thank you. Right. But yeah, I just believe in the power of education. And also, I did a lot of youth work in the Queens and Long Island community with the Asian immigrant population. This was our youth group in 2013 when I just started off as a youth pastor. And over the years, we've just started to do more and more, and we got to see it grow, and we get to see hundreds of students in Queens and Long Island population receive healing and try to improve their relationship with their parents. And that's really what I'm passionate about, to see healing in them, the same healing that I saw in myself. Which brings me to today. This is a picture of me preaching my first sermon at New Song back in January with the legendary Dave Gibbons in the back. Somebody said it looked like he was about to eat a cricket and about to burp. But I like to think that he was backing me up and supporting me in prayer. But now I'm working with the youth of Santa Ana, of Irvine, of OC, and I'm just super excited. And I hope that my story was able to bless you guys, encourage you guys, and believe in the next generation, and think about your own epiphanies and your own repressed childhood memories, and could bring about healing from God through that. So thank you.